Hello and welcome everybody, I am Adam and this is Southend Guy Paranormal. In this Rettendon special episode I am going to look at why Tucker, Tate and Rolf actually went to the lane. If you go back to my first paranormal investigation, we'll be asked why. First of all, I'm going to read you an article from Essex Live dated the 1st of March 2020. The truth behind the Essex Boys Rettendon murders and how 3 drug dealers were found dead in a Range Rover. It became one of the most notorious murders the county had ever seen. On December the 6th, 1995, Craig Rolf, Tony Tucker and Pat Tate were brutally murdered inside a Range Rover on a quiet country lane in Rettendon. All 3 of them were blasted by a shotgun from close range, lying blood covered and slumped in the vehicle until they were discovered by 2 local farmers the next morning. The victims were known to be part of the Essex Boys drug gang, and numerous theories formed surrounding how they came to be shot 8 times in a peaceful Essex village. But it wasn't until more than 2 years later that 2 men, Jack Wilmes and Michael Still, were found guilty of their murder. We've taken a look back through the Essex Chronicle archives to uncover the truth behind how 3 notorious drug dealers met their demise. Fred Hamilton, police affairs editor for the Chronicle at the time, produced in-depth coverage of the case from the moment it happened to the day Wilmes and Still were convicted of murder. And right from the start it was clear this was no ordinary murder. Essex police launched an investigation when the 3 men were found dead on Workhouse Lane on the morning of December the 7th, 1995. They had been alerted at around 8 AM by a farmer who saw the bodies on the track by Whitehouse Farm off the A130. All 3 had been blasted at close range with a shotgun and were lying blood covered in the vehicle, and police said at the time that the victims were white and aged between 20 and 40. Detective Superintendent Ian Dibley led the murder squad from Police HQ in Springfield, and the early theory was that the 3 men had died as a result of gangland reprisal. Thousands of early morning commuters would have driven past the scene, blissfully unaware the grisly discoveries just 400 yards down the snow-covered lane. Detectives were initially checking whether more than 1 shotgun had been used, indicating more than 1 killer, or whether a pump-action weapon had been fired by 1 person. The murder scene was sealed off and multiple crime officers were scouring the area. The Range Rover was metallic blue with an F plate registration, but police had been unable to trace the owner in the early stages. During a press conference on the Thursday, police appealed for anyone who knew anything about the vehicle or the incident to come forward. They said whoever was involved clearly had knowledge of the local area. According to Mr. Hamilton's report, detectives investigating the incident described the scene in Rettendon as carnage. They were 2 bodies in the front of the vehicle and 1 in the near side. 1 window had been shot out from the outside. Detectives were working on a theory that the men were enticed 400 yards down the quiet snow-covered lane and then blasted to death. But Detective Superintendent Dibley said he had not ruled out the possibility that 2 had been murdered and then the 3rd killed himself. Police set about trying to determine if all 3 had been shot with the same shotgun, and officers appealed to anyone who might be able to identify the nearest and dearest who were missing. Detective Superintendent Dibley said at the time, "This is not an ordinary murder. It looks as if they were enticed down there." as far as murders go, you don't get any more serious than this. When local farmers Peter Theobald and Ken Jiggins came across the Range Rover, they thought the men inside looked so peaceful that they must have been asleep. It was only when they tried to wake them by tapping on the window that the reality of the situation dawned on them. Jiggins of Southwold and Ferrers at the time told the Chronicle, "It looked for all the world as if they were asleep. It was only when we looked more closely that we realised they had been shot." There was no sign of a struggle at all. The two men were on their way to feed pheasants on Whitehouse Farm, which was owned by Mr. Theobald at the time, when they found the vehicle blocking the narrow entrance road. The lane had a reputation linked with crime. A hijacked cigarette lorry was taken there 6 years earlier, and safes and burnt out cars had also been found there. Now, in the week following the murders, more information came to light regarding the three victims and their criminal pasts. The Chronicle reported that they met their deaths as a result of a power struggle in the murky world of drugs. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe had been convicted of drug offences, but Essex Police Intelligence revealed that they were well known on the criminal circuit as quite high up dealers. They had been convicted of armed robbery, vehicle theft and other offences, but it was the lure of easy money, and plenty of it, which led them to drugs and to death. Rolfe, 26, and Tucker, 38, died from head wounds, and Tate, 37, had multiple injuries to the head and body after they were all shot from close range. It was revealed that Rolfe's girlfriend, Donna Jaggers, was due to meet him for dinner at about 8 p.m. on the Wednesday evening, and he had been seen at 6 p.m. Miss Jaggers, 27, had been Rolfe's girlfriend for 7 years and was the mother of his child, who was just 6 at the time. In tears, she broke down crying while addressing more than 30 journalists outside Southwold and Ferrers police station soon after the murders. But sometime that night, Range Rover was driven along Workhouse Lane towards Whitehouse Farm. According to police, the victims were not wearing seatbelts, but neither were there any sign of a struggle, although they had presumably realised their fate. At this point, it was believed that they could have known the killer or killers and were probably not driven at gunpoint down the icy lane. It was also revealed that an attempt had been made on Tate's life the year before when he was shot in his Basildon home. It was more than 2 years after the killings when Whymes and Steele were convicted of murder. Labelled as executioners, the two men were found guilty of blasting the 3 drug dealers to death in their Range Rover following a trial at the Old Bailey. Whymes, 36, and Steele, 55, received 3 life sentences with a minimum of 15 years. Addressing the two men, Mr. Justice Hidden said, "There is little that can be said usefully to either of you at this stage. You two men were responsible, in my view, for taking away their lives in a violent and summary way. You lured them to a quiet farm track and summarily executed them." At that point, both men interrupted the judge, saying, "No way." Mr. Justice Hidden added, "They have crossed your path and you showed them no mercy. The fact that they were criminals involved in drugs meant they were subject to criminal law, but not sadly to their lives being ended in this way. There were about these killings a hard and ruthless edge that could only have staggered the non-criminal mind." The trial lasted 4.5 months and the jury deliberated for 4.5 days. It was also reported that the whole investigation and court proceedings were believed to have cost well over £1 million. Whymes, who had his sentence reduced because of his exemplary behaviour in prison, is now able to apply for parole this year. As we know, he's already out. This article was March 2020. So let's look at the man who changed the case. It was only because of Darren Nichols, a driver and general handyman for Still, that the investigation into the murders was able to proceed. The court heard that Nichols had driven the killers from Rettendon, apparently believing they were going on a reconnaissance involving drugs. Then he realised what had happened. Williams was apparently wearing blood-stained white surgical gloves and overalls. The court also heard that guns were dismantled and the killers were amused that Still's shotgun had fallen apart. Still had also allegedly told Nichols that he felt like an angel of death after the murders and said he felt he had done everyone a favour. After giving evidence, Nichols was handed a new identity and moved to a new address, either in the UK or abroad. According to Mr. Hamilton's report in the Chronicle following the convictions, Nichols was almost certainly the most important supergrass protected by Essex Police. Detective Superintendent Dibley praised detectives involved in the investigation, saying Essex should be proud of them. Mr. Dibley said there was initially very little to go on, but they had kept their commitment throughout. So the article goes on to talk about the cannabis drops that were in the West Hanningfield Farmers Ponds, which was very nearby to Rettendon. So we'll read from there. Murder linked to 500,000 cannabis find. Yet again, drugs became a key factor in the investigations into how Tate, Tucker and Rolfe met their fate. Detectives who investigated the case believed there could have been a link between the murders and £500,000 worth of cannabis found in a farmer's pond in West Hanningfield. The cannabis, discovered in 53 black packets, had reportedly been dropped from an aircraft. It was found by farmer Jens Halstrop and recovered by Essex Police's underground search unit about 22 months before the convictions. The link was revealed exclusively to Essex Chronicle by ex-Detective Superintendent Dibley, who retired from Essex Police after 32 years following his involvement in the case. While detectives were hunting the cold-blooded killers, they took a serious look at the possible connections. Detective Superintendent Dibley added, "I strongly believe there was a connection between the cannabis in West Hanningfield and this case. There was also a strong belief that Tate, an 18-stone bodybuilder who took various drugs, was a purpose for the murder. He had fallen out with Still when the 55-year-old had apparently imported poor quality cannabis, according to the Chronicle's reports." And there we go, that was the article, everybody. And so what do you think of that? Now, you can see from the video footage that I provided from my drone the lakes that are by Workhouse Lane. And there is 3 there at the moment, but I've concentrated on 2 of them because I'm not sure whether the third one was actually there 25 years ago. The reason being is when you look at it on Google Satellite, it does look a lot newer than the other 2 that I'm looking at. But that could very well be the reason why they were down there. Indeed, when I did my paranormal investigation, my first one, and I asked them why they was down there, and Pat responded, grass. So was that what they was actually there to do, to find consignments of grass that they had been told had been dropped from planes? And as we've seen from the report from West Hanningfield, there was about £500,000 worth recovered. So is it a case that there was more dropped here on the Rettendon Lakes? Or were they told there was drops at the Rettendon Lake and they've gone down there to investigate it? So either way, as I said, that the response I got, that was the reason. You can actually see now in this picture, the lake to your left, that is the newer lake. But as I say, the one we concentrated on was the 2 that would have been there in '95 for sure. Also had an interesting conversation with my stepdad when I started these investigations, or started looking into the Rettendon murders, and he was actually talking to me about these lakes, and the fact that people used to go out. I think there's a boat on one of these. Whether it been the same one back then, I don't know. But he told me of stories where the pickups would actually row out to a little island. Indeed, as I said, in one of these lakes there is an island, so that is also quite plausible that that's why there's a boat there, so they could row out and get them. We don't know the half of what went on over there, only what we've seen from the information that's been provided to us by the release statements, the release documents, and all the reports in the media and so on. Whatever else the police are sitting on, we don't know. We hope one day that will get released, and we hope TMI get more success in looking into it themselves. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got time for on this one. I hope you've enjoyed the content on here. More Rettendon content will be on its way as and when I get around to sifting through the material I have available. Thanks once again for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. Love and light to you all.